I got a rejection the next day. I'm your host, not for possession, Narcissa Deville, and welcome to hell. So the other day, I decided to send out to literary agents, and I was super excited about it. It's a little bit nerve-wracking because obviously this is something that it's a big deal to me. Like, sending out to literary agents is super important to me because it means the difference between getting your book published and, you know, like, never being heard of. Like, you have to almost, I would say 98% of publishers, especially major publishers, you have to have an agent in order to get their attention. You can't be what's called an unsolicited author, which means you can't just send your book without having any prior, basically without having an agent first to send it to them and recommend it to them and kind of talk it up for you. So you have to have that middleman. It's kind of a requirement of getting published, and being published has been something, it's been a dream that I've had for so incredibly long that, you know, I've done this before. Like, this isn't really my first time at the rodeo, and that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to sort of start out with this. This isn't actually my first time attempting to get a literary agent's attention. I've actually done it multiple times over the course of my writing life, if you will, because I've been writing since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And really, I've been trying to be published just as long. Like, when I was, I think, 11 years old, after I finished my first story that I'd ever written, I straight off sent it to Random House. Like, no agent, no nothing, no request. I just sent it to them. And I was like, cool, bye. I'll sit here and wait for the royalty checks at like 11. Like, who does that? What 11-year-old do you know that has ever done that? I would say that's hashtag iconic, but that, I think that's also a humble brag. I don't know these newfangled terms these kids use, even though I'm literally going to be 26. Not quite 26 yet, but I've been dating a 45-year-old, so I feel like all of these things are like newfangled kids terms. Like, I don't understand the technology. I don't understand the whatever the kids are up to these days. I don't get it. Anyway, so this is not something that I'm unaccustomed to. I'm really used to doing this. This is kind of how I've been doing it for a long time. But I realized when I decided to send out recently, I was like, oh, okay. It's been the better part of 7 years since I last sent out to an agent and tried to seek getting an agent. That's incredible to me. It didn't seem like it had been that long, but at the same time, it did. It went by so incredibly fast that the thought that it had already been 7 years was almost unbelievable to me. And I realized it was my senior year of high school, and that was in 2010. So now, being 2017, yeah, it's almost exactly, it's a little less, but it's almost exactly I almost said 17 years. It's almost exactly 7 years since I had last sent out into an agent. And I was like, you know, I was very intimidated. I have to be honest. You know, it had been 7 years is the better part of a decade. And I was like, oh my God, so much has changed. I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't remember how I ever did it before. Now, mind you, when I sent out to an agent in the 10th grade, or not 10th grade, excuse me, in 2010, in my senior year, when I sent out to that agent, I got a request. I had just sent a query letter. That was all they asked for. I got a request for the first 50 pages of that manuscript. And that was the biggest deal to me because that was as far as I had ever gotten in my life. That was a huge deal. That was like such a big thing to me. And then, you know, of course, inevitably, I was rejected. And I was heartbroken. I was honestly heartbroken because yes, I had been through rejection before, but it was only ever for the query letter. This was a rejection based on actually having seen my work. And I wasn't accustomed to that, and I didn't know how to handle that. So I was kind of like, oh, well, okay. Like, it was hard. It was really hard because it was the first time in my life that I had a rejection based solely on, or at least partly on, my actual written work. And that was so much more different than being rejected on a query letter, because that is your writing. But if you know anything about query letters and you know anything about like how that works, it's not nearly the same as an actual story. It's not written the same. It's not meant to be written the same. A query letter is a one-page document that tells a publisher or an agent basically the Cliff Notes version of your book. And actually, really, at one page, it's the Cliff Notes of your book. Because even Cliff Notes are at least 20, 30 pages. So, I mean, that's like, it's the abridged, super double abridged one-page version of your book. And it's really, especially if it's a longer book. I mean, this particular version is not the longest it's ever been. It has actually been longer, and I edited some things out, and I was very upset about that, but I think that's a discussion for another vlog. I feel like I've talked about it, but I may have recorded it and not actually put it up. But the word count thing was something for me that it is something. It was longer at one point, and now it's shorter, and so, but it's still, I mean, condensing a novel, the better part of 80,000 words, into one page, that's a lot to take down. So that was something that was really, really a struggle for me. So, needless to say, I decided to send out again. I was a little bit intimidated, but I thought, you know what? I'm, not getting any younger. I realize nearly being 26, not quite being 26, means that I'm still fairly young compared to quite a few people in my life. I realize that I'm young, but at the same time, I have to wonder, how many more times am I going to put it off? What other excuse am I going to come up with in the future when I could possibly be older to put this off? It's not going to get any easier just because I'm older. And if the last 7 years have proven anything, it's absolutely that. I feel like I was less scared to send out to agents when I was 18 than I was now at 25. And that's really weird to me. It's weird to me that my fears would have gotten worse and not better in that time. I always feel like when we get older, it feels to me like when we get older, as we understand things, fear should be less common, not more common. And I guess it depends on the thing. You're less afraid of the boogeyman, more afraid of, the real boogeyman, which is, we won't even get into that. But the point is, I feel like no matter how old I get, it's never going to get easier. And that's kind of the conversation I had to have with myself. I had to say, look, you want to do this. This is something you love doing. This is something you have always wanted. You have to go for it. Because no matter how old I get and no matter how long I wait and come up with excuses and everything else, it is never, ever going to get easier. It is never going to be something that suddenly is no longer an issue and I'm no longer afraid, or I'm no longer making excuses to myself of why I should wait and why I shouldn't do it now. There's always going to be a reason that I could wait. There's always going to be something that will come up. So I have to do it now while I have the nerve, so you might as well do it now. And I'm excited about it because obviously it's a big thing. Now, I'm of two conflicting minds discussing this issue currently. Because on the one hand, I'm a little bit superstitious. And what I mean by that is I've always been of the opinion that when I talk about something and I talk it up, it tends to not go through. And it's a really weird thing to say. But there was a story that I kind of have been thinking about a lot. And one of them was December of 2015, I attempted to go for a higher position at my job. And I was, it was a 2-part interview. I did fine on the first part of the interview. The second part of the interview was with the vice president of the entire company and the center manager of the company that I worked for, or our particular center. And I was terrified. I mean, I was literally like speechless, terrified, like nothing. Like complete silence. I didn't know what to say. My heart was racing. Like it was a mess. It was a complete and total mess. And naturally, as I kind of suspected, I didn't get the job at that point. However, when a few months later, the job position came up again, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try for this again. But this time, unlike the first time where I told literally pretty much everyone I knew because I was so excited, this time I said, okay, not going to tell anyone. Not going to tell anyone that I know. Because that way, if I don't get it, I don't feel as embarrassed as I did the first time when I told people and I didn't get it. And of course, I didn't tell anyone, and I happened to get it this time. No, it doesn't hurt that I was more prepared this time around. I took a notebook with me with my notes. Like, I was not messing around this time. I really made a concerted effort to make sure that I was doing everything in my power to get this job. But I was still just a little bit worried and a little bit superstitious. I didn't know if I was going to get it. This November, when the Writer's Digest short story competition came around, naturally I was like, okay, I'm going to try for this. But I'm not going to tell anyone. Literally, I didn't even tell my own mother. I didn't tell my own boyfriend. I didn't tell my best friend. Literally, the people in my life who I would tell everything to. I did not discuss my signing up for this competition and submitting to this competition. Because that's my level of superstition. Like, I was not going to talk about it until I knew. And I still didn't get it. I still was passed over. They weren't interested in the story. And what it makes me realize is maybe my superstitions are a little bit ridiculous. Because obviously, talking about it, I didn't get it. But not talking about it, I still didn't get something I wanted. So it kind of makes me wonder, does it really matter? So I've been second guessing whether or not I should discuss that I was sending out to literary agents at all. And particularly the part of the story that I think is the most important that I'm getting to in a minute. Which is that I got a rejection the next day. And I think that's important to know because most of these agents said that they have a 3-month turnaround time. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. 3 months, less than 24 hours, probably 12 hours, if we're being honest, is what the response time was from this agent. That is a little bit of a blow to the ego. Like, I'm not going to lie. Seeing someone who's like, hey, I just like this so much, I have to answer you now. I can't wait 3 months. I have to answer you in 6 more hours from whenever you sent, 12 hours from when you sent it. That's rough. They really didn't like that. And that was, it was a nice rejection. Don't get me wrong. It was very, very polite. I feel like all of them that I've ever gotten are polite. So, I don't know if they're just naturally polite to everyone. I feel like they must be. It's just my own personal experience. I've never heard of anyone getting a bad rejection. So I'm kind of curious to see if anyone's ever gotten like a rough rejection, like a throw your pens away, kind of like just really rough rejection. Because that would be tragic, but really interesting to hear about because I don't know if that's a thing. But anyway, it was a very polite rejection. It wasn't anything... I was kind of conflicted, honestly, about it because on the one hand, it was like, okay, basically my worst fear of how this can go. And essentially the worst that can happen when you send out to an agent, by the way, is that you get rejected. So, okay, 2 things colliding. Worst fear of what could be happening here, and also the worst thing that actually can happen when I sent out to an agent. So I'm like, okay. On the one hand, I feel like, oh my God, this is like, it's starting the process all over again. Like, I sent out to 6 agents. This was the first one to respond. I now have 5 more agents that I'm waiting to hear from, and hopefully we'll hear from, and hopefully it'll be better news in the future. But it was really kind of like, oh, so that's what that feels like to be rejected again. And that was like part of my feeling, and part of my feeling was like, okay, well, I mean, I can survive this. Like, it isn't the end of the world. And that was kind of a comforting feeling too. So it's like, on the one hand, yes, this is not what I wanted. But on the other hand, keep it on. I'm never going to stop writing no matter how many times I get rejected. I'm certainly never going to stop trying to get published and trying to get my name out there. So that isn't going to matter. So the only thing that happens is, yeah, I got rejected. And that sucks. But I'm not going to stop. I've still got tons more people to send to if I need to. And I've still got at least 5 who I haven't heard anything from. And now it's been almost the better part of a month because it's now April. It was the end of March. It was like the 21st, I think. So, I mean, there's a silver lining, I guess, to all of this, which is essentially that I'm still here. I'm not going to stop just because of one rejection. It hurts and it's hard, and it's, especially when it's something you're so passionate about and you love to do so much. The thought of being rejected is so, it's aggravating and it's hard, but at the same time, it doesn't change anything. You know what I mean? I'm still here. I'm still writing. I'm not going to ever stop. So it's a little fork in the road or a hurdle in the road. It's nothing I can't leap over. And that's the most important thing. Well, thank you all so much for watching. I'm your host, Still Not for Possession, Narcissa Deville. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to see more of Narcissa Deville, please feel free to follow me at narcissadeville.com, facebook.com/Narcissa Deville, Twitter at Narcissa Deville, Instagram at Narcissa Deville, and of course, listen to my SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Narcissa Deville, or search us on iTunes at This Has Been a Thing. Thank you all for watching and come back soon.